Kieran, so you've got, I think it's about 7 minutes to speak, and then we've got 3 or 4 minutes to ask you questions.
No worries.
Over to you.
And I'll ring a bell.
And
Okay.
7 minutes. Yeah.
Okay,
And
no
what
worries.
it's the way to the candidates, it's not being live streamed, but we are recording it. And we intend to, providing everything goes well, we're going to put it online. So it will be online and through our channels. So, okay, Kieran.
And who's adjudicating? Who's being the?
I think this isn't cutting into my time, Brett.
Okay, no interruptions.
Well, kia ora tātou. Good day, everyone. Thanks very much. I just want to commend you for this initiative. I think that this is exactly what should happen. And I wish other councils did it, frankly, because the relationship between central and local government is pivotal, but it is one that hasn't been valued for a long time over successive governments. We've had 3 previous reviews before the Future of Local Government review, and pretty much all of the recommendations were ignored. And that is a missed opportunity. I'm determined as the current MP, but also as Minister of Local Government, to ensure that we don't waste this opportunity. So there's some pretty interesting recommendations that have come through the review and the final report, touching on every aspect that is relevant to local government. But the one I wanted to focus on today was rates and the sustainability of revenue into local government. It's very clear to me that rates alone are unsustainable. In this region, we have seen in South Wairarapa 2 years in succession of roughly 20% rates increases, and there's no guarantee that that will stop. In our communities, we have councils that are either at their debt cap already, or their communities simply can't afford to pay higher rates. And this is the challenge that all of you face every single time you consider rates, because of the cost pressures that are on you as a council, but also the reality of ratepayers in our communities and their ability to pay more. And that's a really difficult decision. We're of the view that rates alone should not be the only revenue source for councils. And so when the report was published, I invited Local Government New Zealand to lead a conversation within the sector to find consensus on what the best solution to this is. Now, some people have said that will never happen. I would respond by saying, well, that's part of the reason why nothing's ever happened. And it's an opportunity that the local government sector shouldn't pass up. I'm not asking the sector to come up with one silver bullet to the issue of rates, because what works in the urban areas might not work in provincial and vice versa. What I've suggested they might want to do is come up with 5 or 6 solutions that councils individually could look at and select perhaps 2 or 3 that will work for them. An example is that an option has been mooted that we allow councils to impose a levy on accommodation. That's awesome for Queenstown, Rotorua. It's not, and possibly even South Wairarapa to a smaller degree, but it's not going to make too much of a difference to Marsden. And it might not be solely that central government provides more additional funding, although I think it needs to. It might be that central government, through changing the law, allows local government to have more levers available to it. So that's the commitment that I've made as Minister, and that the government will see through. If this review isn't taken up in some form, because all it's done is start a conversation. If after the election, local government and central government don't come to an agreement, then we are in a serious issue. If the water reforms are reversed, then local government and ratepayers are facing a serious issue also around affordability of rates. And we need to have a conversation around the cost of maintaining and upgrading our roading structure as well, because that is a massive burden on the Marsden District Council. And frankly, Marsden doesn't have anywhere near as many roads to service as, say, Tararua, but it does have almost 3 times the rate of paying base. So the further rural you get, the bigger the problem. And so that is the commitment that we've made. We've heard alternative approaches around sharing GST, for example, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that later. It is worth exploring, but we mustn't assume that that is going to solve all problems. It equates to about $1 billion a year. Spread over 67 councils, that isn't much. When you consider water services alone, $185 billion over the next 30 years. That's going to solve that problem 150 years too late. So that's how serious the issue is. And I'm determined to fix it. I'm actually quite passionate about local government. I was one of the few people that wanted the local government portfolio. I put that down to the time that I spent working here at council. And I hope that I have that opportunity to continue in that role, certainly at the local level, but also in the ministerial level as well. I'm not sure how long that is, but I think it might be more value if I open it up for questions now, and we can delve into some of the issues that you want to.
Okay, Brent.
You say that rates are unaffordable and someone disagrees with that. I would like you to comment on the fact that rates are only unaffordable because councillors, elected councillors, aren't very good at balancing the wishes of the community, and sometimes it's only very few of them, with the reality of the rates. And I would argue every day down in Wellington, you go through exactly the same balancing act. Just like you to dig in a bit deeper about rates being unaffordable, because that is blatantly untrue as political decisions are going in the wrong directions.
I understand your view that we've discussed at length a number of times that, to sum it up, council should stick to its knitting and not go beyond that. There is always a balance between meeting the public's expectations around service delivery and what costs are associated to that. Your view on what the core functions of the council are different to many others. But if we scaled it back and just focused on, if we looked at the very core services of council, roading and water services, the costs that are coming in the context of that 185 billion that is required to upgrade and maintain water services, plus the reality of roading in the context of climate change, even if council stuck to those two services and nothing else, the costs that will be incurred by ratepayers in the longer term will be unaffordable. So I don't necessarily agree with your point, but I understand where you're coming from. But I think even if you did scale it back, there are realities that are going to be faced in particular by provincial and rural councils, and especially by people on fixed incomes, that they simply won't be able to afford the reality of rates moving forward if rates are the sole revenue stream for councils.
Councillor Johnson, or Ben still say.
Thank you, Your Worship. Hey, Karen.
G'day.
I just want your comment on two of the things that were in the Future for Local Government report. One was the suggestion that government should pay rates on Crown property. And the other one was that central government should fund climate change adaptation or mitigation.
Well, the second one is very much in train as it stands. So at the last budget, the government announced $6 billion for resilience work, and that's available across all councils, regional and district. The first part, I've said on behalf of the government that we are open to that. We're open for that being part of the conversation. But I was sincere in my desire to try and get some consistency within local government sector. The reason why I've done that is because it's fair to say that the Three Waters debate got a little bit sidetracked from the core issue. And there was a range of views within the local government sector. There wasn't any consistency. There wasn't the need for reform, but there wasn't in how we went about it. Where we've landed now has got a much better response from the sector, but I don't want to go through that again. So we've said to LGNZ, lead this process, come back to us. If central government paying rates on Crown land as part of that package that they present to us, we will have an open mind and have that discussion, absolutely. For some councils, like the West Coast, like Opotiki, massive amounts of Crown land, and yet there's no revenue coming from that. I would say though, that obviously Crown land doesn't require many of the services that council offers. So if there was to be rates paid on that, it would surely not have to be at the same level as say other parcels of land that do get services from council.
And also it could be tagged.
Yep.
As to what money that was
It
spent.
could be. And we're open to that, yeah. There are other options as well, that we're basically, we haven't ruled anything out in the context of revenue. We're open to hearing from the sector. I hope that the sector takes that opportunity up, because it's going to be very hard for me as minister to go to my cabinet colleagues and say, I think this is a good idea, but it's only got 55% support amongst the councils. It's going to be very tough. So,
LG are leading, need to lead the charge.
yeah, not and not by excluding councils that aren't members either. They're just leading the conversation within the sector. It's not within LGNZ. So Auckland Council and the West Coast Regional Council can take part in that. I want them to, but it needed a body to lead that conversation. And it will require negotiation and compromise within the sector, but it will increase my chances as minister of getting something across the line and helping the sector if I can say everyone's on board. Let's do it.
Thank you.
Councillor Tom.
Yes, thanks, Kieran. You talked about the challenges that are in rural areas and climate change. And I think all our rural areas have got our challenging roads. One that springs to mind for me at the moment, which is particularly, well, I don't see a solution to it, is the Martai Corner Road. What do you see as the solution to that situation and roads like it?
No one could honestly promise that every rural road in every district could be fully funded by central government and local government, because essentially there's going to have to be very tough conversations in vulnerable communities like that. I'm not suggesting that that is the case for Manus Retreat, but there are communities in New Zealand that, in the context of climate change, there's a genuine question over how viable they remain to be. That's a conversation that's happening in Marlborough at the moment around some of their coastal communities after their severe weather event, which happened only 12 months after the previous one. The first one caused $85 million damage to the roads. The second one, the tally is still being calculated. The government subsidised the cost of repair by 95% for the first event. The council told us that if the government came in with 95% subsidy, they couldn't afford the 5%. And so they're having to have really difficult conversations. What concerns me about the current structure is with the FAR rates and then the government coming in to assist if there's severe weather is if you leave the $6 billion aside, because that's not guaranteed if there's a change of government, there's no guaranteed funding. And the resilience of rural roads shouldn't be left up to the whim of the government. There should be certainty around funding so that informed decisions can be made at a community level. And councils can then prioritise their funding allocations, knowing exactly what the funding is going to be moving forward on the longer term. We've also got to be upfront with people. We've said that we are going to increase the excise on fuel by 4 cents in order to be able to increase the funding available to local councils to pay for their roading, in particular rural roading. If we don't have a funding structure like that, it's an empty promise. So we've come under criticism for proposing to increase the excise, but we're being honest, is that if we want to maintain the current level of maintenance, we've got to pay for it. And this is how we do it in this country. It's not nice. No one likes to pay at the pump, but that's how we pay for our roads. Previous government froze the maintenance budget on state highways for 9 years and now complain that there's potholes. We've got to avoid this. We've got to be upfront and give local councils the resources they need to be actually make these roads resilient.
And in terms of, down to the last one. Is the government thinking through some guidelines around managed retreats? Yes, or they are.
Yeah, we have to.
Any timelines on that?
The work was, I'd say, 2/3 of the way through when Gabrielle hit, and Gabrielle made us come forward a lot quicker than anybody wanted to. And when you've got an unprecedented event, nothing's going to go as well as it would have done if you've had time to plan fully. But that work continues. So the way that we've worked with local government around Gabrielle, on the whole, will set a blueprint moving forward for future events. But there needs to be other discussions, because it shouldn't take a serious weather event in order to have a discussion around whether a community continues to be viable. There are a number of coastal communities where that conversation needs to happen. Having the conversation doesn't mean the decision's been made. It's about having an honest realisation that with climate change, adaptation needs to start now before it's too late. So the adaptation plan is due to be completed within the next year.
Thank you, Kieran. Just one final one, which I'm going to ask all the candidates, is this future local government is a bipartisan. Right through that report, there's comments regarding the fact that central government have to change their game to make things work. Would we have a commitment from Labor that you will take that future local government report seriously and implement most of it, at least most of the things that are?
Well, you certainly got that commitment from me as Minister. And the reason I've asked LGNZ to do what they've done is to put us in the best possible position to get something across the line. I take this incredibly seriously. If we don't make changes now, it'll be another 10, 20 years before something happens, and it'll be yet another missed opportunity. So no minister makes a commitment without the support of cabinet. So you can say that if the government retains office after the election, there will be some changes, good changes made in the sector, but only those that has the support of the sector.
Just a quick yes, no question here.
Right, okay. Yes, no.
Yes, no.
Simply because I've been an old student.
I have yes, no.
That's why I'm asking. Kieran, on the unlikely event that you're not in government after the election, do you see yourself as being the leader of the opposition?
No, I like it. Yes, no. Yeah, I can absolutely say that I have no desire to be the leader of the Labor Party in any form. I'm getting married in January. I hope to have kids, and I've just got no interest. I've seen firsthand. Sorry, I know this is not yes, no, but I've seen firsthand watching Jacinda Ardern and Chris Hipkins trying to do the best job they can, but also trying to be a good parent, and it's almost impossible. And for me, family's always first. So I'm interested.
Good answer.
Thank you, Kieran. Thank you very much, Kieran. We appreciate it. Okay, Simon. I'm Casey from the Act Parties. Welcome, Simon.
Right, thank you, Gary. See if you look like you'll be my bouncer. Got my stopwatch, so I'll make sure I control my, I do sometimes get onto a bit of a tangent and tend to on other things. But look, thanks for allowing me to come and speak to you all. Great privilege to be able to do so, and great to be able to share with my political colleagues as well. And I think the engagement process is really important because central and local government, it's a type of marriage that needs to be sorted out. And what I'll share with you is just some of ACT's more generic policies that I think will be of interest to you, and we can have a bit of a discussion on that as we go. So one of the first things that we want to do is assist councils in being able to free up land for the purpose of housing, right? And one of the things that we want to do as far as that is concerned is make it so that the consenting process is a lot easier, and that liabilities on councils can also be reduced as far as building is concerned, building and development is concerned. What ACT is proposing there is that developers and builders should be able to get insurance on a house-by-house basis, and the insurer takes the liability. And that actually then allows councils to be not so restrictive in terms of what happens as far as building innovation is concerned. Councils want to be risk averse, and I can totally understand that, but that has unintended consequences. So one of the things we want to do is try and remove risk from councils when it comes to development. The other thing that's related to development, which is really important, is it's not easy to release land if you have to provide infrastructure to be able to allow a development to grow. And so what ACT is wanting to do there is share half the GST that's related to consenting and development costs that the government takes 100% of now. 50% of that would be shared back with the councils in order to help with roading and other infrastructure that has often been seen as a break. Now, actually, I think there's a bit of bipartisan support for that, because I was talking with Celia will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think even the Greens support a sharing of the GST. You can confirm or deny that at your turn, Celia. And that is great that there is some bipartisan support for that. But as Kieran mentioned, and he's quite right, the whole funding model for councils in terms of the rates is not fit for purpose, and it's across the board. So what is it that we can do to improve that? We don't have all the answers, but it has started with half the GST for development being shared with the councils. The councils, I believe, need to have two types of income. One comes from the rating base, and of course that's a form of wealth tax, because it all depends on the value of your property. It's not a user pays type thing at all. So if you have to be in a fairly well-off property, and perhaps it's just grown in value through no effort on your own part, you could be ending up with quite a bill. And people feel rates too, because you have to pay a rate, whereas tax, you pay as you earn, you don't often see it. But you see these bills come through and they take money out of your account. So perhaps there should be some sort of transactional component as well. Now, ACT doesn't have a policy on that right now, but that is the sort of thing we're looking at. In terms of principle, ACT wants to devolve, being so Wellington-centred, wants to devolve governance more out to the local authorities. And with that has to come funding as well. And the important point about that is the councils know and engage with the community and know what is important to be done. You can't rely on Central Wellington to do that. With Central Wellington, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the oil. And Auckland has a very, very squeaky voice and actually can drown out some of the smaller areas. If you already had the funding, then you can decide amongst yourselves as to where that is best spent without having to continually going hand in hand to get that funding. So that is what the general principle as far as we're concerned. And it comes down to, there was an example where I think with roading, I think Southland has missed out on roading changes as a result of the latest round, and yet they all pay road tax and they have got roads that need repair. We can't allow that sort of thing to continue. It is unfair, and we do need to resolve that. In terms of water, ACT is very much of the opinion that Three Waters, the councils should own the water assets and continue with the operation of the waters. What has to happen is, again, better funding. I mean, the government so far has committed up to $3 billion just to get the Three Waters, or now with going from 4 authorities now to 10 authorities, to get that underway. What if that $3 billion had already been shared with councils to help them with their water? A lot of it has just been wasted. And that is a crime. That is actually, that is taxpayer money that's essentially gone down the drain. The structure was already in place. It was you guys, and you've already got it. And so wouldn't it be better to enable you more to do it, as opposed to try and take the assets away and put it yet under a different bureaucracy and the funding required for that bureaucracy? I don't think New Zealand is well served as far as that is concerned. So engagement with local councils is ACT's fundamental principle here. Councils have a very, very important part to play, and in fact, ACT believes they have more of an important part to play moving forward than they do right now. You can't be strangled. You can't have a tourniquet around your funding that's preventing you. It just causes angst amongst your residents, your ratepayers. Rural ratepayers seem to be suffering a fair amount as well. They believe that they're being unfairly treated, paying for things that they're not necessarily using, and this just again causes angst. Got to have a fairer base for funding. I think that is the most significant thing that we can do. I also applaud the council for looking at the idea of perhaps amalgamating in some respects, because I do believe there that there's economy of scale in sharing some of the services. I'm a little surprised that South Wairarapa hasn't wanted to join in, because they're the group that could probably benefit the best. from having something like that. But I certainly commend you, and I think you should try and continue with that as well, because then you have a wider base and a bigger voice when it comes to dealing with waka kotahi and various other things, whereby it's been very frustrating. Having 3 voices in the Wairarapa, or 4 voices when we include Tararua, is not as good as having a single voice. And I think that's really important when it comes to negotiations and making a stand on things. I think that's about it. I think I'm empty.
Simon. Okay, question from Simon.
We should speak about anything.
Okay, Brent.
You mentioned about, the valuable homes paying a lot more than, poorer people pay.
Yes.
And you, I'm just curious for your attitude to the 3 waters, 10 waters, the water proposals that are floating around, which will target volume interest.
Yep.
Mhm. And so if you live in a $10 million house or $200,000 house, you both use the same amount of water, will pay the same. What's your, that's one aspect of this reform I'd like to hear with you.
Yeah, look, I totally believe that should be the case. You use, say, 1,000 litres of water. If you're in a $10 million house or $100,000 house, you should pay the same. It's the same with power, right? People who live in rich, in more expensive houses don't pay more for their power. If there are people who need assistance, then there's a means of being able to assist them. And I think that's what we should do, not try and cross-subsidise by the value of their house, subsidising what really should be a use-of-place service. Power and water, I believe, should be treated exactly the same.
You, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Simon, for being available. You talked about fair funding for local government and talked about sharing the GST on development of housing and so forth. Probably not going to, when it comes to renewing our water infrastructure, through water infrastructures. So what's the thinking around supporting councils to actually upgrade their water infrastructure? Where will that funding come from?
Yeah, actually, the important part is that when it comes to capital development, there's kind of 2 things. There's the operational side of your operation, and then there's capital development that you need as well. What ACT is also proposing is for large-scale projects that you can be free to enter into a public-private partnership in order to develop significant projects. Now, like an example of that, and I know one of the things we've got to look at, and climate change came into it. I'm a big proponent for the reinstatement of that Waka Mokau reservoir, right, to adapt to. We're going to have dry years. We're going to have serious dry years. But even if you have a wet year, the dam can be used to regulate water flow. And that is very important. But just apart from that, you've got the whole tourism potential associated with having a lake in the area. But how do you fund that? Well, it has been funded, but unfortunately, the consent process stalled it, and that's a shame. If it has to start again, it may be that projects like that have to go to a different funding model, which may require a public-private partnership. But it shouldn't be. Public-private partnerships will allow things like, for example, transport. If we want to do something with our roads here and we haven't got the capital, it may be, take a bypass, for example. We don't want to see trucks go through the middle of Carterton, and we're not going to get the funding from Central Wellington, but you have the ability to get a public-private partnership. You might be able to put a road through, perhaps a bypass all the way from Featherston, follow the railway line right through, which is a toll road. And the important thing then is everyone can still go through the main centre, but now you've got a bypass, which I think a lot of people will be prepared to pay for if they don't want to, get constrained going through the towns. That's exciting.
David.
He's actually answered the question on water storage I was going to ask.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but just around the roading, I think the New Zealand government, whoever they may be, needs to look at the structure that Ireland uses. Their roads are streets ahead of us, and that exactly that, they're toll roads, they have cities connecting cities with a segment.
Yeah.
You know, I was only there a few months ago and it'd been sort of 8 years since I was there and just streets ahead of us, streets.
Very correct term to use, streets.
Streets ahead of us.
Yes, yeah, I totally agree.
I think we need to start looking outside of our own little nest
Yes,
and
we
what
do.
other people are doing.
Simon, yeah.
It's been my voice, Simon.
That's right.
Yeah, on things like that bypass.
Yeah.
That you just suggested, how do you feel that would impact on pretty much every small business between Livingston, Carlton, Freetown in terms of, getting access to that incidental traffic? Because being from Paparamari, that's my hometown, and speaking to the business owners there and seeing how that's been absolutely decimated by that new motorway.
Yeah.
I think that, but that our area, we see ourselves a bit of a tourist route. I think this tourist route could be potentially completely bypassed by a large project.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, and actually, I think where examples of that happening in the past, I mean, we've got now, OTAC has got that challenge, right? But the challenge really is, and the Wairarapa has done very well with this. Martinborough is a magnet, right? You can put a bypass in, it's not going to stop people going to Martinborough. It's an attraction in itself. Greytown's fast becoming the same thing, or actually already is. The challenge is for Carlton and Marston to do the same, right? And what we've got to do is open up reasons to stop. But if someone does not want to stop there, I don't think they should be frustrated and being trying to force to stop because of the snarl of the traffic going through the main streets. I still think people just go through, but they go through slower rather than faster. I actually think it's a benefit overall to the region by allowing freedom of movement of traffic.
Simon, just finally, to you, Tuesday, Commissioners, this is a bipartisan future for local government board. Would you be able to give any conviction to us that ACT would comply with the recommendations that were enacted?
I'm not in a position to do that, but ACT is very involved with that. And I believe that the answer to that, I'm just not authorised to say yes, but I believe it would be.
Okay. Simon, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike Butler. Mike is, all of you know, representing National. You know, the rules, Mike, 7 minutes, 3 minutes questions. Over to you.
Thank you very, very much. And I would just like to start thanking you very much for the opportunity to attend. And I have made a very deliberate effort to go and engage with all our other councils as well. And I guess the first thing I would start off, I would just acknowledge all the work that all of you do as councillors. And I certainly understand that it's gone from a part-time job to a very much a full-time job. And it's very much a part of contributing back to your community. In terms of local government, I guess that we've touched about it, the 3 waters we have said, affordable waters, we will repeal that within 100 days. Our view is that those assets belong to the community. In terms of acknowledging that every council is different, every council has different ratepayer bases, different debt levels, different levels of standards of infrastructure. Our view is that we will sit down with councils individually and tailor-made in partnership with councils, solutions with them. And everything will be on the table. Whether it's a check out, whether it's different funding mechanisms, everything is on the table. So that's our view there. One thing I would talk about, I think that's quite exciting. We're very keen to look at doing regional deals, which is about a strategy or a vision for a region. So we would love, and it may be that the 3 councils here, what are the 1 or 2 key strategic things that you would like to see done in the future for this local economy? And it may be water storage, it may be any other projects, but we're very, very keen to engage with that and get those underway, lock them in, and they will endure through whatever changes may happen in terms of governance or at a local or central level. So I think that's quite an exciting opportunity because we tend to spend a lot of time living in the here and now, and we don't talk much about what we'd like our local regions to look like in 2040 or 2050 and what infrastructure we need. So I think that's something positive. Look, just in terms of the roading, obviously there are some significant challenges there, and particularly post the storms as well. We are looking at establishing, and we call it a pothole fund, which is just a reprioritisation, reallocation of, instead of spending 9 million on 21 raised pedestrian crossings and implementing speed plans, that fund will get reallocated with a focus on getting that into regional, provincial roading to help. What else have I got here? One of the biggest things that we could do as a government, if we're fortunate enough to get voted in, is to try and reduce the cost, and that is the inflation. And I think you're seeing that with everything that you do and the growth and the cost of your services that you provide. So that's something that we're particularly focused on as well. So look, that's probably a little bit from me.
Just amalgamations, in the review, they touched on amalgamation. What are your thoughts on it?
I guess amalgamation, look, if I'm fortunate enough to be selected, my role is to support what the community wants. I have a view as a ratepayer, but I think just an observation, anything that can add efficiency to the services that are delivered to ratepayers, I would think should be good. But in terms of my role would be to support what the communities want and the councils want.
Do you think we can handle the Unitary Authority?
If that's what you want, look, I know Unitary Authority works very well up in Gisborne. So don't necessarily be scared in terms of what's your view is on what's happened in Auckland. I think every region will have different requirements, different challenges. But again, my role is just to support what the community wishes.
Thank you, Brent.
I'm curious to dig from that last question. Greater Wellington spends about 16 million more than that rate in this area because of our rivers and goals and stuff. And so with your background and for you personally, do you think we should be pursuing a unitary and picking up that tag?
I guess, look, I'm a little bit reticent to comment from a personal point of view because my role is to reflect the community's views. And so, but in terms of what it is that is explored as a council or merge of councils or a unitary authority, it is a matter of kicking it around a little bit, see what it looks like, see what funding looks like, and then having a conversation with central government.
Yeah, Mike, I represent sort of the youth community, Masterton, and within the local government board with the lowering of the voting age. Where do you sit with that?
We don't support them.
That's not that.
Okay, Mike, just finally, again, the same question to you. This is the my parts report, future for local government. Where does National sit on implementing the recommendations of the?
Again, I'll come back to probably our view, Gary, is that we would prefer to sit down with every council on a council by council basis, acknowledging that everyone has different challenges and actually working out how we work together.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mike. Celia.
Kia ora, everybody.
Celia, as you'll be aware, is representing the Green Party. Of course, it has very much experience of local government, being mayor of Wellington City for 2 terms. I think.
Watch out for your job, Kerry.
Kia ora. It's actually really nice to sit around a council table again. I've just got, and thank you for your staff organising this. I've just been sitting with Carterton District Council. I'm on their walking and cycling advisory group, and I didn't think I'd just, that means about quarterly, I didn't want to miss out on that. So, yeah, that I do feel there is a role for central government to better understand local government. And I know within my own party, Eugenie Sage has been one of the wiser people talking about what might or might not happen with water. We've got a chief standing down. And we've got Land Farm, who's got Environment Canterbury, their regional council experience. But I do think we also need to have that direct territorial authority experience in government, because all flavours of party can land things on local government, give you a list of 99 different things to do and no money to go with it. So I'm very aware of that from a personal point of view. I'm also very supportive, as you would expect from ex-Mayor of Wellington, that government should pay rates on properties, because that was a real problem in the capital. There were, all the workers coming in, the wastewater, all of that sort of stuff, but if it was leased, they paid, but otherwise they didn't, which is crazy. I had a good look at the report. I've got a lot of time, particularly with Penny Hulse. I think she's done a really good job of putting things together there and listening to people. Our formal Green Party position is that, again, similar to Labour, is that we actually would like the local government sector to agree on their priorities, and we'd like to support that. But I want to say a couple of things that we absolutely agree with is the move of the 4-year term seems sensible, because at the moment, if you take the 3 years, you've got 1 year out for local government elections, you've got 1 year out for central government elections. If you like, you've only got 1 year of peace and getting on with things if you're not careful. So I think that would be a bit helpful. But in a bigger picture, if we're talking, I think we need to move to multi-partisan, not bipartisan. I don't think Simon Act and Green are quite in the position to form a coalition. So, when I say multi-partisan, there will be tweaks, but we would like to support, first of all, the civics education. There are so many people that actually don't understand what central government does, and they certainly don't understand the role of local councils in enabling well-being. They might see the odd multicultural festival, or they might complain about the library hours, but looking at that totality of what you do, any civics education, which is important, and you could argue about exactly what age it kicks in and so on, but has got to include the role of local government. I do support Vote 16. I think it's perfectly sensible to start off with doing it for local government and then move towards having central government, but we support it, central government as well. After school jobs, people pay taxes, you're allowed to get married, you can drive, you can do all sorts of things that you would think would require a little bit of judgment. And we don't, got to be careful, because I'm getting into the gold card territory here myself. We don't actually have a test as to whether people are making sensible decisions in their latter years about whether they can vote or not do it. So I think we follow the Supreme Court in New Zealand in that instance and implement that. Did put some notes so I don't ramble off into too many interesting directions. The other way of transcending this, whether it's 3 or 4 years, looking for long-term assets, whether it's where we put roads, whether it's civic centres, whether it's water storage. I'm quite excited by a model that Ngāti Toa and Pororua City Council are trialling. I think they're in the early stages of it, where they actually have a citizens' assembly, and they're chosen a little bit the same way that you choose people for a jury, in that it's not a self-selecting mechanism, that you actually get 100 people from different walks of life. And obviously you have to pay them a little bit of their time to do that. And it's also got a very strong Maori-led component in that. And again, I think people are scared of co-governance in a way that they don't fully understand, to bring those different perspectives and the different knowledge of the land. And if you're pretending to be Ra, and I don't believe it, Gary, looking at from here, Ra's stories about the landscape are fascinating from a storytelling point of view. You can tell he's a Shakespeare scholar, but they're also fascinating for the understanding of the connectedness of where the water comes and flows and what happens. And to bring that into our long-term planning, I think it's fantastic. I'll say a couple more things about Three Waters. We think that 10 entities is better than 4. a bit closer to the communities. We don't think stormwater should be separated off from what council does, because, you know, your urban planning, whether you have parks, and we're very keen on having a bit more green space in towns and cities that can also act as places for the water to go and have rivers flowing more naturally and so on. That's not really something that those bigger entities might be so good at. They might be good at the hard infrastructure. And when I look at what has happened with privatisation, even though we talk about public-private partnerships, somebody is going to want to get profit out of it. So I'm not sure they're the panacea that thought of. You looked at what happened with rail in this country, or you look at what happens with the water entities in the UK. There isn't suddenly lots of water provision or cleaner rivers. They've actually got huge problems in the UK. So I would be particularly allergic to that. James Shaw, as Climate Change Minister, has introduced the Climate Adaptation Act. So yes, we absolutely think that there should be good partnership on, you know, how do we deal with what we can't avoid. But let's not put all our eggs in the adaptation basket. We actually do need to do the mitigation as well. We're small, but if every 5 million person city in China said, oh, well, we won't do it because we're only 5 million, you know, we won't collectively get there. And we do need to earn a premium for our farming products by being good global citizens as well. So that would be a couple of other things. Having moved over the hill, you've got to be careful about saying over the hill, don't you? It seems to me that a lot of people's interests are actually the same. Some of this rural-urban divide is a bit of a fabrication and a division. We actually all want our kids to be able to jump in the river or go walking in the hills or be able to get to their jobs or their apprenticeships or whatever. And I would like to see that we work together in both in terms of funding and in terms of understanding. It would be quite good. And with those emissions reductions, they have to come from all sectors. Agriculture is beginning to come down. Congratulations, but you know, the pace is a bit slower than we'd like, but transport is going in the wrong direction. I'd like to acknowledge Kieran and his leadership and us working with the Greens very strongly in support to getting more trains. I think Masterton's location of your train stations in the town centre is a real issue that you could think about some urban planning, stronger connections, possibly some more building there rather than at the edges of town where you're using up productive land and you have to put in new infrastructure and you get more car dependent communities. I think you've got some real opportunities around some of the stations to do something better there. Yes. And yeah, the potholes. I do think we need to look a little bit of history here. Those big trucks went from 44 tonnes to 53 tonnes, and that was like thousands more cars on the road. At the same time, the roading maintenance fund was frozen. Not a very good combination. So maybe we might can look into the history of what National decided at those times. And I know that LGNZ was anti-moving into those really big trucks, but we're not. That's something that's gone. We're not going to be able to change it now, but we do need to think about the consequences of having more freight on roads moving onto rail. Nothing for me.
Thank you very much, Celia. Right, questions for Celia? Great.
The productivity commission and other people on that subject say that New Zealand is a productivity problem. And in fact, many reports particularly pick on local government as having an even worse productivity problem. I'm just curious, especially with your background, your comments on why you think council's productivity.
In what measure of productivity?
One some people might be saying we're doing more or less the same as we were 10 or 15 years ago, but the staff have doubled.
I think there is a danger that it's easy to start new projects and it's difficult to stop new ones. I think that stop old ones. I do think that there is an issue there. But I think we've also understood that the world is complex. Bringing well-beings back into the role of government. I don't agree that it should be just about roads, rates and rubbish. Sometimes the amount of money that's spent on staff, when I think about the resettlement of refugees, when I think about how helpful librarians are, how you've got the climate change advisors engaging with the community. When we do far more consultation, occasionally perhaps too much, on things like the cycle route. You know, maybe 30 years ago, if you're going to do it, you'd just have done it. And I'm quite pleased that you're allowed to at least be able to try things without going 3 times round. But you know, you can't do consultation without having people. So I'm not sure that they're comparing like with like local government. I think you could if you talked about, say, just water or just roadings. But I mean, you look at the public partnerships with Transmission Gully, that went well over its budget. So I don't think necessarily bringing in the private sector would always make things more efficient.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you. I just want to, there is a question on this. You said earlier on that you actually supported the voting age of 16. Well, but you wouldn't do it at central government level.
No, I said I would do it at central government level, but I don't have a great objection to it starting at local government. No, I absolutely support vote 16, but I also understand that changing anything about our voting needs a super majority at government. So rather than saying because you can't do it at central government yet because you don't have the parties agreeing around the table, I think starting with local government, civics education about local government is pretty important. And the whole thing at 18, lots of our young people are moving. They're moving into a job or they're moving towns to go to university or they're going on OE or something. Whereas at 16, the opportunity for them to be engaged at school or talking about civics and so on is greater. So I just think 16 is a better age than 18.
So back to my question. Okay, so because issuing us an edict and not following through yourself will drive a real wedge between central and local government. And we need to work closer.
Oh, but that report on local government absolutely recommended voting age of 16. So we're accepting that that was a good idea.
You would leave instead of wanting us to leave? Would the Green Party leave?
Well, I think we have. I think we've been quite clear that we think it's a good idea and that this also thinks it's a good idea. I don't know who's leading who, but we're coinciding in view. Yeah.
Right, Silly, the question I'll finish with the others as well. The Green Party, have you got a position on this future for local government report in terms of supporting or not supporting the recommendation?
Some of the recommendations are already policy, so I can say absolutely. In terms of the exact funding, we would like you to come to a common agreement and then support you. I don't agree. I mean, there's 76, is it, councils in the country? I don't agree with the national approach of going to each council and then talking about it because we'll be here for an awful long time. So if through LGNZ you get a majority position on it, then I think the Greens are likely.
Thank you very much.
But it's a really thoughtful piece of work and inclusive and it's good. Yeah.
Could I just say on behalf of the council, to thank all 4 of you for coming along today. I mean, it's a real privilege to councillors to have the 4 people who are looking to become a representative, to have them all in one room. I think one of the things that really impresses me about the 4 of you is that you can see immediately here that there's no animosity amongst you, that you're really all there to work with the Wairarapa. And we as the council really do appreciate that you know, it's all very well hearing politicians slinging off at each other, but it's great when you can actually sit down, have a proper conversation, and at the end of the day, everybody has to make that final decision on who we take it from our box. So, look, thank you very, very much for coming. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.